In my last video, I started my kitchen makeover by turning this old dresser into a coffee station, and over the last 2 weeks, I've been working on transforming the dining area of my kitchen. I've had this project designed out since the moment we got an accepted offer on this house, and I'm so happy I finally got to tackle it. Unfortunately, this project wasn't as straightforward as I thought. Hey guys, what's up and welcome to my channel. My name is Miley. If you are new here, I do DIYs, so if you like DIYs, you should probably join my party. Okay, we can stop that now. I ordered supplies for one of my big projects next week, and instead of sending me what I ordered, they sent me LED lights that do this. Honestly, I'm truly not mad about it. Now I have no reason not to throw a party. So, over the last 2 weeks, I have been working on the dining area in my kitchen, and this project hit a little bit of a roadblock that put me a week behind, and at one point, I did want to take this whole project, throw it in a fire, and watch it burn. But I didn't do that. I persevered, I problem solved, and I fixed it, and now it looks so much better. I have a lot to cover in this project, so let's just jump right into it. So here is my dining area before this project. The chandelier was in the middle of the space, so when we moved in, of course we just put our table right under the chandelier. And this made the space feel so much smaller than it actually is. So the big thing that I worked on and built over the last few weeks was an L-shaped bench that ran along the corner by the 2 windows so that I could push the dining area up into the corner of the space. By doing this, I thought it would make the space feel so much bigger. It would also showcase the fireplace, which is probably one of my favorite parts of the kitchen, and also make more room for a larger island. So let's get started building this bench. Of course, we have to get started with this project cutting up some wood, and here is my cut list. So, you might have noticed that the table I have already came with a bench. And you might be thinking, why didn't I just use that bench, push it up against the wall, and move the chandelier? Well, that bench isn't really the look I'm going for. I wanted to create a built-in-esque looking bench, but I didn't want to actually make this a real built-in by removing the baseboards and attaching it to the wall. I just wanted something more substantial, and I also thought by making this bench bigger and having it span the whole corner, it would provide more seating if we ever needed it, and I also thought the built-in looking bench would create a cozier look. I went with a pretty simple design to build this bench. I built one bench at 8 feet long and one bench at 5 feet long, and I made the benches 17 inches high and 16 inches deep, and I based these measurements off of the chairs I have that are gonna go on the other side of the table. I didn't attach the 2 benches together because I wanted them to be separate and easy to move if for some reason we ever needed to move them. And with every project recently, I've been using pocket holes to screw pieces of wood together, and with every new project I think, wow, this is a lot of pocket holes, but nothing truly prepared me for the amount of pocket holes I was going to have to make for this project. But I did break up drilling all of these pocket holes because it was super hot out, and this northern girl hates working in the heat. So I did my first batch of pocket holes on all the 13-inch pieces that I cut, and then I moved everything inside to start building the frames. And after the frames were built, I had to go back outside into the heat to make some more pocket holes with all the 9-inch pieces that I cut. And after the second round of pocket hole making was done, I used those 9-inch pieces to attach the 2 8-foot frames together and the 2 5-foot frames together. So at this point, the benches were actually in a pretty good spot. There were a few warped pieces of wood in the frames that I had to kind of rework, but at this point I was still feeling pretty good. So to cover up these frames, I got a super thin piece of plywood. I'm not sure how thin it was, but it was the thinnest, largest piece of plywood I could get. You guys can clearly see how flimsy it is. I cut this board down to size to cover the front and sides of the frames. And at this point, it was getting late, as you can tell by the dark footage, but I was also determined to get the top pieces of the bench cut out. I used some super cheap 1/2-inch thick pieces of plywood for the top of the benches. And since it was pretty late at this point, I just let the board sit propped up against the frames for the night, and by the morning, Bonnie was already really enjoying her window seat. So I started off day 2 by attaching all those thin pieces of plywood to the frames. And then to further continue to give this bench a clean, more built-in look, I got some pieces of tongue and groove board to put along the bottom. Tongue and groove board has one side that's flat, so I thought this would make for a less expensive option for some base molding. I did hit a roadblock with this molding, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Then I went around and covered up all the nails and screws to make them blend in. And while I waited for the wood putty to dry, I got started on upholstering the top of these benches. I did one big piece for the 5-foot long bench, and then for the 8-foot long bench, I broke that up into 2 different cushions. And at this point, I started to really not like the way this thing was turning out. Up close and in person, it just looked really sloppy, but I pushed for a little bit, thinking by starting the sanding and painting process, things would get better and I'll just get covered up. But after painting for a few minutes, I realized that painting was going to fix nothing. And that's when I felt my stress level and frustration just going up and up and up. I didn't think this was gonna bother me, but this big old gap between the wall, but there's also a vent back there, so I gotta figure out what I want to do with this, because I do want to push it closer to the wall, but there's a vent back there. And then also there's just like, I wasn't planning on doing trim up here, but there's just a big old gap that looks like just straight, just poop. So much poop. You know, I didn't have a miter saw, so that doesn't look good. This corner as well also just looks like poop. Also, another big gap. This is all wonky. What is that? That looks like crap. There's a gap there. There's just so many gaps. It looks like poop. I'm getting frustrated. So after spending a few days calming myself down and spending a little bit of time reevaluating this project and my life choices, and something I literally never talk about in my videos is I juggle making these DIYs and videos while running a business doing hair and makeup for weddings. So if a DIY takes me just a bit longer than I have planned out, it can throw a huge wrench in my process and in my schedule. And that's why I think this project started to not look good, because I felt myself rushing. And don't rush through your projects. It's all just gonna be a snowball effect in the end of things going wrong and just looking really bad. So here's what I came up with to fix all my problems. Well, my problems with the bench. If only this actually fixed all my problems, that would be great. So to tackle this vent issue, I had to restructure the frame to work around this old and rusted vent. So I started out by cutting out a piece between two of the vertical beams, and then I took that piece, moved it up and screwed it in place, and then I added those floor pieces back in. And when that was all done, this is what it looked like. But this then created another problem of that one of the major vents for our kitchen is now covered up. So I got my husband Jordan to build a vent into the bench, because this part of the project, I just didn't feel like doing it. Yay for husbands. So what he did is create a channel for the air to blow up through the vent and out into the room. So that was two major problems now solved. Then came fixing all of these gaps. I switched out the tongue and groove boards for some MDF boards. I got some 1x4s to run along the bottom and some 1x2s to run along the top and clean up those gaps. And then I did also cut some short vertical pieces to clean up some of the other gaps. And this time around I borrowed a miter saw since I don't have one, and this helped me get some really nice precise cuts. I originally borrowed the miter saw because I thought I would do some 45-degree angle cuts to clean up the tongue and groove boards, but since I switched to the MDF boards, they already have a square look to them, so the 45-degree angle cuts I didn't think was necessary. And with all the new trim on, I then went in and covered up all of those nails with some wood putty, let that sit, sanded it down, primed and painted the bench, and I did 2 coats of primer, 2 coats of paint, and I did nothing crazy, I just kept the bench white. Okay, the bench was looking so much better at this point. Now came all of the fun, final detailed stuff I had planned out. Since these benches are now pushed up against the windows, I switched out the curtains for some Roman shades. These fabric Roman shades create a nice and pretty and cozy look without getting in the way like the curtains would. Next, the corner between the two windows felt really bare, and when you walk into the kitchen, the bench naturally directs your eye to that corner. So I wanted to create something interesting to look at, and I also wanted to create something that would draw your eye up. So I made a quick L-shaped shelf. What? That's a tongue twister. Anyway, I made an L-shaped shelf to fill in that corner and be able to display a few things, making that corner more interesting to look at. And since I was moving the table, I had to swag my chandelier. To swag a light, you drill and put a hook in the ceiling where you want your light to go, and then using a chain and fishing the cording through the chain, you swoop the chain and the cording together over to where the electrical box is. The hardest part about swagging a light is you may have to extend the cording for the chandelier using some electrical tape, but besides that, this was super easy to do. And the very, very final thing I wanted to do in this corner was create a charcuterie board gallery wall, because, you know, I'm a millennial and we just kind of love our charcuterie, and you can never have too many charcuterie boards. And now let's add the final details. so happy this project is finally done. Not only did it take me a week longer than I anticipated, but this was the first project I had designed out well before we even moved into this house. And I've been pushing this project off for a while now, and I am glad I took the necessary time to slow down and do things right to make this look as good as possible. And pushing the dining area up into the corner really did transform the space. Everything I thought would happen happened, and it looks so good. It feels so much bigger in this kitchen. The fireplace is now a huge focal point in the room, and now I can get rid of this tiny little useless cart and put in a more substantial island. And the bench also creates such a cozy vibe. And since I have so much more room for activities in here, I am gonna go have a party with my cat. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.